Claire's gay.
Welcome to Masculine Geek, where men gather to discuss life, love, and all things geek. And unlike most YouTube channels, we don't beg for super chats. We don't play cutesy little sound bites. That crap is lame and feminine. We're men swapping notes and gathering together for men talk. We don't whine about politics or trendy red meat topics. That's juvenile 13th grade garbage. Masculine Geeks are men of courage and honor that gather together to discuss our hobbies and interests. Get on board, gentlemen.
All right. That's right. That's our new...
You can never go wrong with a Gore novel cover. Especially one of the classic covers.
Totally. The Boris Vallejo one, yeah.
Mm.
So welcome to Masculine Geek number 270. This was a topic that was recommended to us by none other than Masculine Geek, Robert Kuzland, because he was a DJ and is heavily into music then and now, actually. So this is really going to be his show. We're going to be adding a little bit as we can, personal anecdotes, but as far as professional music goes, it's all Robert. So welcome, gentlemen. How is everybody doing?
Doing all right.
Doing well.
Cool.
Just got the youngest tucked into bed. Although he's not asleep. I think he's actually talking to his mom on the phone. But anyway, he's taken care of. So that's dad stuff.
Gotcha.
Constant. But
I can only imagine.
Yeah. It's interesting. Topic for another show though. Anyway, gentlemen, we know TJ is pretty much stuck in 1940s America, musically and otherwise. But I say that only because of some of the dancing and stuff you do, which
he likes a lot of heavy metal though.
Yeah, and stuff. And Vince, I've always pictured Vince as being this jazz guy, hitting a jazz bar, drinking some wine, whether he's got a dame on his side or not. But I mean, that just always that kind of vibe from Vince.
Jazz
completely off the mark on that, Vince, or
no? You're pretty much spot on. Jazz and classical. In fact, there is a dedicated channel for that in the Philadelphia. In fact, in Center City, Philadelphia, WRTI.org, and you can listen to them internationally, really, because they have an app, and you can listen to the broadcast via the app. But the local area, the jazz and the classical music every morning. In fact, that's what I do on my way to work, is classical, my coffee, relaxing on my 35-minute commute. And then on the way home, it's usually either generic music or more often than not, an audiobook. So jazz and classical are my go-tos.
Yeah. And like I said, I was teasing TJ, but I mean, there's some truth in that you do like big band music and stuff like that, and you like things you can dance to and actually do so as far as that goes. But what other kind of music are you into? Because I mean, that's something you and I have never really talked about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of go through phases, but man, I'm thinking about it. I know a lot about like classical rock, oldies, stuff from the 60s, 70s, 80s. I do actually know. I took a classical music course in college. I still have a notebook for my notes. I actually really enjoyed it. I liked the music. The thing is, for me, I can't have that as background music. I can only just listen to it because I'm at the point where I don't want any background noise when I'm working on something. And even if I'm reading a book, I just want to be kind of quiet. If I'm going to have that kind of music in the background, that's when I'm just sitting there with a smoke or a drink and just being introspective. But I love Tchaikovsky. I think he was great. The Baroque period, I like that music quite a bit. I'm trying to think of all the different composers. I haven't heard all of Wagner's opera. The book it's based off of. I'm trying to think of
the ring cycle is what you want to stick with.
Yeah. I mean, I think that some of Beethoven, Bach, a a lot of the just some of those. There was this Renaissance Fair type guy who played music, and there was this song. It's one of my favorite songs. It was written by Richard the Lionheart when he was imprisoned in Austria, and I think this guy sung it in the original like old French, and I really like the song. So, and then Henry VIII wrote a bunch of songs too that I really like. So it's kind of what mood I'm in. If I'm in kind of a mood where and then I also like some old like Western music. I'm watching Ken Burns' Civil War, the Ashoskin Farewell, whatever it is. That is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. I love it. So it just depends on what mood and what occasion it's at. I also love Irish music. I actually there was a guy who rediscovered all these Irish American songs that were written during the Civil War, and I know a lot of them by heart, and a lot of them are quite good. And so my musical tastes are actually very varied, but I go through different phases. Back about 10 years ago, I was very much into just Irish stuff, so I know a ton of Irish songs. So
you're familiar with bands like Gaelic Storm and the Eldar or the Elder and stuff like that. Those modern bands that play traditional Irish folk tunes and stuff. Obviously, Gaelic Storm got a lot of notoriety by being the Irish party band in the lower class section of the Titanic in the James Cameron film.
Yeah.
Although they've had some lineup changes since then, I think primarily with their like female fiddle player. But
I really like the Dubliners.
Okay.
I mean, they're a very old group, and then High Kings they're pretty good on some stuff. They're a little bit more polished, whereas Dubliners, what I liked about them is they just very much felt like, I mean, the one guy, I can't remember his name, Ronnie Drew, I think it was. I mean, he had that like voice that was perfect for just the songs that he sung.
Right.
And then there was also actually, I like a lot of sea shanties. There was a guy up in Canada who wrote a bunch of them. So my musical tastes are very varied. It's kind of like with beer. I don't drink Hefeweizens except during the summer.
Okay.
I just don't do it. There's certain beers and wines I don't drink unless it's really hot outside. I tend not to drink sweet wines during the winter. I like to drink red wines or dry stuff. So, but no, I actually have quite a bit of musical knowledge. The problem is there's not a lot of occasions to talk about it anymore. This is kind of the loss I feel like we have with the lack of like places where men of intellect could get together and just talk about intellectual stuff. I mean, all we've got left is the dirt bar.
Now, are you familiar with Blackmore's Night?
I've heard the name. I've heard the name. I'm not terribly familiar.
You ought to check them out, because Richie Blackmore's band, and has been his band for several years now, along with his wife Candace Knight, who really cute blonde, got a beautiful voice. In fact, she had done a duet with a European metal band called Avantasia, and the song's called Moonlight, Moonglow, and it's a really cool song. But they're obviously Blackmore's Night is very much kind of a Renaissance fair style of music, but done with a rock edge, which I think can't be helped by virtue of having Richie Blackmore playing guitar and other stringed instruments on their albums and in concert. And also, I think Play Minstrel Play, which is off their first or second album, Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull played like this intense, insane flute solo on it, which is just absolutely magnificent. So if you like
Ian Anderson of Yes fame?
No, Jethro Tull.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The guy who usually stands on one leg while playing flute.
Like a stork?
Yes, very much. He does, and he like contorts and everything. If you look up any Jethro Tull concert videos, especially from back in the day when he was not a man in his 70s, but a man in his 20s doing that stuff, he was very like dynamic, jumping on stage and performing and everything, and then he'd rock out with this amazing flute solo. It was just Jethro Tull is a very interesting band. One of many I like, although not a band I got to play a lot of in radio because the various formats of the places I've worked at. Oldies for me, oldies is 50s, 60s, and like early 70s, which is a format I've worked in quite a bit.
And I just realized it's not Ian Anderson. I was thinking of John Anderson.
Yeah. I knew who you were talking about, but it's So
no, feel totally correct me. That's because that's
well, I mean the last names are the same, but Ian versus John. But
you have a favorite Tull album?
Oh goodness. I like Aqualung a lot. I like Music from the Woods. Benefits, not too bad. Thick as a Brick is just one of those albums that I know it's supposed to be kind of over the top and kind of rubbing it in the noses of music critics who complained that Aqualung was too much of a prog story driven album, anthology kind of thing. And so Tull kind of got shredded in the music press over it in various ways. So they're like, oh, you want a theme album, we'll give you a theme album. And so they released Thick as a Brick, which in the LP format, I mean, it literally, you open it and like the bottom of the pages drop out as if it's this huge old newspaper, which of course has all these various news stories in it. And of course the cover story deals with this young poet prodigy who's stripped of his award. And of course he's got this like young ingenue with him, which considering the kid's only about 8 or 10, and and he's got this 20-year-old saucy tart with him and all this other stuff. It's just a really interesting take and tweak of the nose to the music press and intelligentsia. But the actual music itself and the song itself and the lyrics on Thick as a Brick, and then the musicality when you get into the various breaks and bridges, and it's just I like that album. I've always liked the album. It's one I have no problem playing from beginning to end. So I guess if I have to really narrow it down, it's probably going to be Aqualung or Thick as a Brick as my favorite Tull albums. Certain other bands, it's a little bit easier. Like if you were to ask me like my favorite Black Sabbath album, it's easily going to be Heaven and Hell. It's the first album with Ronnie James Dio. No problem. It's the first album with Ronnie James Dio on lead vocals. He brought his writing over from Rainbow into Black Sabbath, so it was more than just Geezer Butler writing the songs. Vocally, he is a much better singer than Ozzy, and I just love the depth of that album. And Mob Rules is also great. So I mean, it's a very, very close second. I know a lot of metal fans, if they like the Dio era Black Sabbath albums, tend to prefer Mob Rules over Heaven and Hell, but I really just like Heaven and Hell. I mean, opening with Neon Nights, it's like a real kick in the balls. So it's such a good album. So yeah, things like that are a little bit easier for me to pick than with certain bands like Tull. But Yeah, and then there are other bands, I like. Musically, I'm kind of all over the place too, because on the one hand, I will listen to something like Asia and Yes and stuff that's very much prog rock, or although a lot of prog fans don't really consider Asia to be prog, because although every member in it has prog credentials, it was so commercial and poppy that
you like new wave.
Yeah. So like Gary Newman and some of those guys from that era. I've grown to appreciate Duran Duran more so as an adult than I did when they were immensely popular in high school, because they were, to me, it was like I couldn't listen to the music over all the chicks screaming. It's like, and the fact that they were so big and so popular and so everywhere, I didn't give them a chance. But like, 2 decades removed from that, I can like listen to Rio and listen to the musicality
without all the
of their
background
playing,
noise.
without all the background noise, and without the fact that, pretty much every high school girl's bedroom I ended up in the 80s had a, friggin' Simon Le Bon or Duran Duran poster hanging on their walls. And it's like, copping a feel while Simon Le Bon's staring at you, it got annoying after a while.
It's not gonna do it.
Yeah, it's like,
Depeche Mode was kind of like that. I got more into the Depeche Mode in my more adult years.
yeah, they're still one of those bands I've never really gotten into, although I understand why other people really like them. And and they're definitely one of the bands that I've made a parody of one of their songs. They're Reach Out and Touch Faith, your own personal Jesus. I used to sing that as your own personal Yoda, reach out, touch force and stuff like that all the time when that song was new and popular. Much so that my older 3 boys are to this day shocked when they hear certain songs and are surprised that, oh my God, that's a real song. That's not just some crap dad made up.
It's like you've got some proof.
Oh yeah. So it's like I was teaching my son number 3 how to drive, right? So he's like in high school, gonna graduate soon. Mom would not let him learn how to drive, whatever. And he's like, Dad. And it's like, yeah. It's like, you need to learn this stuff. I don't care what your mother says. You need to know how to drive.
Her little boy is growing up.
Yeah. She can dislike that all she wants. She can worry about insurance all she wants. It's like, you'll have your own job. You'll pay for your own car. You'll pay for your own insurance. It's like, but you got to know how to drive. So I taught him how to drive. And plus, as he put it, he didn't want to learn from his mom because his mom drives like a New Yorker. Which
women can't drive anyway, so we already know this.
Yeah. And although she kind of grew up in Iowa, but she was born in New York. So,
and I was a driving instructor, so I know from whence I speak.
Oh, I don't doubt that for a minute.
Yeah.
Just looking at the ones around here, putting on makeup, eating a sandwich, and talking on their cell phone or texting while they're driving. It's just madness. But anyway, I know women can generally multitask well, but there are limits, especially when they have such poor spatial perception. It's like, I don't care that you can do 12 different things at once. You still cannot see how close your car is to mine. I can. So anyway, so we were driving and we were listening to some music, and for some reason I had switched to radio for something, and Pink Floyd was playing, and so I just let it play, and it's like The Wall Part 2, and they get to the point where if you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat
your meat? That's right.
That's something I told all of my sons when they were little at dinner time. It's like, how can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Yeah,
exactly.
Just it's a standard
thing. Maxim, really.
Right. Well, he had never, I guess, listened to enough Pink Floyd, or at least not The Wall, to have ever heard that bit at the end of the song. So when he heard that, he's like, oh my God,
That's real.
that's real.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, well, yeah, it's Pink Floyd. I could have told you that. All you had to do was ask. He's like,
Right.
no, you don't understand. You make up and sing your own lyrics to so many different songs. None of us know what's real and what's not. It's
Right.
and so anyway, so
And Blake, yeah, early U2, U2 in general is garbage. The Cure I like. If you're in a contemplative goth kind of sad, feeling sorry for yourself mode.
mhm.
I saw them several times in concert in the early early to mid 90s. And then recently I had this pleasure of seeing Robert Smith on stage. It's just sad as hell. He looks like a bloated slug.
Yeah.
It's just I felt bad. I felt embarrassed for him.
The only U2 I like is early U2.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, I always like The Alarm, which is a Welsh band,
Yep.
better than U2.
Rain in the Summertime.
Yeah.
Good
So
song.
yeah, 68 Guns and stuff
Mhm.
like that. I always thought The Alarm were more of a true rock band, and I always thought U2, especially by the time you hit Joshua Tree, they are like becoming peak condescending, effete douchebags, and
That's putting it
so-
mildly, but that's a good way to
yeah,
start.
yeah. So, but yeah, I think what was it when the Cure got inducted to like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is a whole other. Yeah.
One
Anyway,
of the best albums is Disintegration, and then their
Yeah.
later Blood Flowers wasn't too bad.
mhm. Yeah, I can remember all the kids that played Vampire the Masquerade, like
Oh yeah.
were into the Cure, but
Yep.
that was like probably the most mainstream thing they were into, because
Mhm.
all the rest were either industrial bands or some like
metalheads.
really weird local goth bands and stuff like that were doing like specifically like trans-industrial vampire rock stuff, and it's
There's a cool band I was introduced in the late '90s called Creeper Lagoon, and
Creeper
they-
Lagoon. That
Creeper
sounds like a.
Creeper
That sounds
Lagoon,
like a. That sounds like where Aaron Clary lives.
right? The first album is I Become Small and Go. We were at this is back when I was doing Suburban Noise, our local magazine that I had founded in the late '90s, and we were doing interviews of local bands. We became friends with one of the bands called the Gaffy Sticks, which is obviously from Star Wars. He was a huge nerd, so he used to have what he would call geek parties, where he'd invite a bunch of nerds over and have alcohol and food and just hang out and listen to music and play. If he had video games on or like a board game or something, it would just be a huge nerd bash. So that's
Right.
why I first heard about Creeper Lagoon. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. I mean, your stuff is good too. Gaffy Sticks, solid. Creeper Lagoon, pretty good too. So there you go.
Hey Vince, I'll have to send you a picture of it later, but Ryan Stone mentioned you quite warmly on Twitter earlier today.
Oh yeah.
It came out fairly recently about
You can send it on.
I probably sent him it already.
Oh wait,
you
is that
did-
the one you mentioned earlier?
yeah, about
Jay?
Cappy. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
about Cappy, and this chick was kind of talking about, she didn't even like Cappy, but she just thought it was unfair that American tax money was being used to
Oh, that's right. That's what
And-
that's what you were
and
referring
then
to. You did,
and
yeah,
Ryan,
you did send it
yeah,
to
and
me.
Ryan said something about the effect of, wow, it's pretty bad when your enemies like treat you more respectfully than Vince does. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's how you know we're friends if I fuck with you.
yeah,
And I have to say, and I've told this story before, but not to be petty, but Aaron did start it.
yeah.
So I give it. He's getting it with both barrels, fucking stop until
Well,
the
and
day one of us
deservedly
dies.
so. Well, I was talking to someone because when I was over near St. Louis to see Angel, and I was hanging out with some of the guys in the band, one of them in particular was giving me grief pretty much all night long, just constantly bashing my balls. It was just, it was hysterical at certain points. And I was talking to somebody afterwards, and they're like, "What was up with that?" And it's like, you don't understand. The guy's from like Jersey or New York. The fact that he was doing that meant that he actually likes me. It's
Exactly.
it's like guys from Jersey. It's like if you're bros, they give you grief. That's how they, you're worth their time by the fact that they're cutting you up. If you weren't, they just wouldn't talk to you. Yeah, it's so trying to explain that to someone. It's like, I'm a Midwesterner and I even know how that works. So, but anyway,
women can understand it on an intellectual level.
mm-hmm.
If you told to them logically, they could go, "Oh yeah, I could see that." But on a visceral, functional level, as far as our how men interact with one another, they're physically unable to get it.
No,
it's not. It's not in their DNA to act that way with each other.
I think there's like a cartoon or a meme or something goes around, and it's like two guys like just completely insulting each other. It's like "F you, your mother," da, 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 da. And it's like, and then the one guy walks away, and the guy that's still left is talking to someone else. It's like, I love that guy. He's like my best friend. And then they showed the same thing, but from a woman's perspective, it's two women talking. It's like, "Oh, darling, you look so wonderful." It's like, "Oh, it's so great to see you. I just love you so much." And as soon as the girl walks away, the woman that remains looks at another woman. It's like, "Oh, she is such a bitch. I hate her." And it's just the different ways. It just, we're wired different. Men and women are different.
Like a guy will walk into a room into a room full of his friends and go, "Hey, what's up, fuck faces?"
Yeah.
Women they're not going to do that ever.
Well, that's one of the problems with these spaces where you have, gender integration. Of course, one has to be barking. Gender integration where men have to talk and act and interact in a way that makes women feel comfortable. Because if men are interacting as men, women get uncomfortable, and that's just what I say. That's one of the problems is men have no area to express themselves. So yeah.
Well, other than virtually like here and Masculine Geek.
Yeah, that's literally. I mean, this is
really all we have.
This is really what's left. I mean, I try to do stuff here in like a physical area, but it's like it's almost like the Mandalorian where only one person can appear above the surface at a time,
Exactly.
Because there's so few of us. I mean, yeah.
Well, and what's sad is that stuff being forced into areas where it absolutely doesn't belong, as far as, a squad bay of a platoon somewhere in the military, or barracks and places like that. It just doesn't belong there. And, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for the men, and it's not healthy for our team building. And in spaces like the military, that team building is important. So yeah, I don't know. I just can't. I'm me. So and plus the older I get, it's like, why on earth am I going to change now? It's like, I am who I am.
Yeah.
It's like, even to me, if I use the term gender, I'm referring to language. He, she, it, der, die, das. That's where the term really belongs in describing, gendered languages. Whereas if I'm talking about people, I'm talking about sex, male or female, because that's the term, that's the right, accurate term. And no matter how much anyone wants to change it, but yeah, it's sad. And of course that's in a lot of different places in music, in the music industry. And it's part of the reason why the music industry is so messed up right now.
Well, that's why everything there's such lethargy, is because I'm trying to put it in words. Men have a certain energy and aggression that is translated into everything they do.
Yes.
When women are in control and they see that male aggression being expressed, it's something it goes beyond their control. They freak out and they want to control it.
Mm-hmm.
And so men learn. I'm trying to think of how to say this in a very tactful way. It gets to the point where, well, it gets to the point where the man eventually realizes, one, at this point
Mm-hmm.
in the game, there's enough men who are willing to confront him on behalf of the woman.
Oh yeah.
He's just like, it's not a cause he's willing to like fight over in perpetuity. So he just checks out. And then they sit around and wonder. It's kind of like the guy who got arrested for defending that woman in the subway, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And women are getting attacked in public, and guys are standing around doing nothing. And these women have the audacity to say, "Well, where are all the good men?" And it's like, ladies,
we're literally giving you what you asked for.
I told a woman this recently. I said, if you raise men that can't stand up to you, you're raising men that won't stand up for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's a two-way street. If you want a man that is able to stand up for you and protect you, he has to be able to control you. Mm-hmm. Not saying he should, but like that's the whole thing. It's like if you're physically stronger than him, then he obviously you can beat him in a fight, but also you can't turn him and expect him to defend you if somebody else is trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
But they don't.
No, there are lots of things they don't understand, which is one of the reasons why if they're not mine, I don't talk to them because it's a waste of my time.
Well,
let's get back to our music discussion too. What's that?
Weird Al Yankovic, Running with Scissors, autographed by Weird Al.
Oh, nice.
That's cool.
One of several things I've got around here autographed by various bands. This is one of the European metal bands I like, a band by the name of Hammerfall.
Oh, I remember you talking about them, yeah.
Yeah, this was their last album, which I just so happen to have autographed by the various members of this particular lineup. So
that's cool. Now, when you get an autographed copy of something, do you get one to not open and have it autographed, signed, and then get another like working copy too? Because I do that with books.
There are certain things I've bought that to be autographed that I probably won't play, but they're usually like for like certain bands that have new albums, I might buy a vinyl edition that I'm never going to play the vinyl, but I will get it autographed so that I can frame that album and hang it up.
Okay.
But there are certain things like for example, Angel again, having them actually sign my original vinyls from the 1970s that have been played and have been loved and are worn. Yeah, I will do that in a heartbeat. And and most of my CDs I take
CDs nuts.
Yeah, CDs nuts. I take really good care of them. So
yeah.
So they're not something that's getting slapped around. I buy cases to replace cases that have gotten broken or worn over time.
Yep.
And so, and plus, usually I will burn them onto various formats, so that way I have them in various places on MP3 players and whatever. So I don't always have to break out the CD unless I'm putting it on a really good stereo system, or in the case of vinyl, a really good hi-fi system. Because there are certain albums. Jerry Rafferty's City to City is an album that is wonderful on CD, and you can do this with CD. But if you've got a really nice hi-fi system to play vinyl, and you can drop the needle down on City to City and hear that opening sax solo on Baker Street, lights down low, drink in hand, Candle. I mean, that is an album to listen to by candlelight with drink in hand. That is just, it is an absolutely gorgeous album. And some of the songs are just really, really moving, and it just absolutely great to listen to. Al Stewart, who did the song Time Passages and Song on the Radio, probably best known for the song in the album Year of the Cat, is another one that's great to listen to by candlelight. There are a lot of albums that came out in the 70s, especially right around 77, 78, that are just really, really good FM, almost kind of jazzy albums that are meant to be listened to by candlelight with either, you know, a bourbon
Fireside.
or wine, a good bottle of wine. So I don't know, there's just something, there's like this really interesting musical sweet spot in like 77, 78. And what irritates the snot out of me now is the term yacht rock. I hate that term.
I've never heard that.
Much. It is yacht rock is a term used to kind of denigrate and disparage rock and pop music that had kind of a mellow edge to it from the late 70s into the early 70s or into the early 80s. So like bands like Ambrosia, bands like England Dan and John Ford Coley, Jerry Rafferty, Cliff Richard. So a lot of different bands that had these kind of like mellow, highly orchestral, kind of beautiful songs that for some reason they're like, yeah, these are the music that like Michael McDonald wrote so that they could buy their yacht. So that's why it's called yacht rock. And it's the same way any heavy metal music,
yacht as in boat. Okay.
Yeah. The same way any hard rock heavy metal from the 1980s is called hair metal. And it's the same kind of disparaging.
It's usually, it sounds like it's
superficial over substance.
It's exuded by a critic who's never played music in their life, right?
For the most part. I think the term yacht rock was actually coined by like a comedian or something as kind of a dig at that kind of music and stuff like that.
Probably, but probably doesn't play professionally or even as a hobby.
Yeah, so it just caught on, which is sad because one of the channels on Sirius XM that musically I like listening to is the Yacht Rock channel. But I still cringe and like want to throat punch someone every time I hear them do, you know, say yacht rock. But they really kind of play into it with like the snooty, you know, when you're basking on the yacht and you're just too cool for school, yacht rock, Sirius XM, you know, that kind of nonsense. So they really kind of lead into it. But then they've also got like the hair metal channel too. So and Ozzy's Boneyard and stuff like that. So
okay, I've heard of that stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, there are musically, I like classical. I really like Wagner. I do definitely like Tchaikovsky, Liszt. I tend to like very ballsy sort of stuff. And that definitely translates into like orchestral scores for movies that I really like. I mean, Basil Poledouris is my favorite movie composer. I absolutely love his sound. And I mean, this is the guy who did the soundtrack to Flesh and Blood, Conan the Barbarian, Flight of the Intruder, Red Dawn, Hunt for Red October.
So his soundtracks were fantastic.
Yeah. So, but he has a certain sound, just like John Williams has a certain sound.
It's crazy how with John Williams, there's parts of Star Wars where it's definitely you feel the Indiana Jones and the Indiana Jones where you're like, this is almost Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have a style.
Yeah, Williams definitely has a very strong style that you just recognize him whenever you hear him. And I like John Williams a lot too.
And he's still composing, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he just recently retired or announced his retirement. So but obviously,
still, I mean, we grew up with him, and
absolutely,
he's still alive. It's amazing. It's very cool.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But then you've got guys like James Horner, who also has done stuff I like, but whereas Williams has a certain style or sound that is apparent in everything he does, Horner, it's almost like he steals from himself so that it's like
different.
Yeah, it's like literally the same 3 chords in like 2 different movies, or like, oh, I recognize this theme. It's you use this in the last movie. Are you sure this wasn't just supposed to be the temporary track as you wrote? So yeah. Whereas probably while I will say Basil Poledouris is my favorite, I will probably acknowledge the best as being Jerry Goldsmith, who
what did he do?
Well, Star Trek the motion picture is one of the things he did, but he also did the soundtrack for the movie Legend. But that score was only used in like the European version of the movie and released over there, whereas the American version of the movie had the Tangerine Dream soundtrack. But Goldsmith literally has done like 100 different movies. Von Ryan Express, Planet of the Apes. But the thing that's cool about, I think he even did The Lion in Winter. So the thing that's really cool about Jerry Goldsmith is the fact that he does not have a style. The Planet of the Apes soundtrack sounds absolutely nothing like Star Trek the motion picture. And it shouldn't, because they're 2 different movies. So he literally
it could be 2 different composers, really.
Yes. And so he literally makes the music to fit that movie. So his style is whatever is required for the movie. To tell the story of the movie to fit the movie. So you can play stuff by him and it doesn't sound like there's unless you are a music nerd, there's no way it's him,
or reading the
just
album
listening
cover.
to it. Yeah.
Whereas, you know what else actually? Oh, go ahead.
Whereas Williams and Horner and even Basil Poledouris have a sound that is apparent and recognizable in pretty much everything they do. But anyway, go ahead, TJ.
Oh, I was saying, another interest I have as far as music is cinema music.
Yeah.
And like early stuff. So, King Kong, I was watching a documentary on it because I have the DVD, and they were talking about how it was like the first true cinematic soundtrack or score, because, and there was a specific scene where they did this, where there's the king of this island who's coming down these steps to confront the explorers. And the music matches his steps, like each step he's taking down the stairs. Right. Like dun, 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 dun. And so, whereas prior to that, and this is 1933, and of course the train has come by.
Yeah, it actually fits.
It was an example of where the score was written to match the action on the screen. And this is kind of, speaking of Tchaikovsky, this is an interesting little nerd geek tidbit. His for the Nutcracker Ballet, the soundtrack he wrote, not soundtrack, the score he wrote, that was written to match the choreography. The choreography determined the music. So there's a lot of things in the music and the songs that is specifically written because of what the choreography was going to be.
So he went to go look at the draft of the play, as it were, and watch the actors and actresses.
Yeah, so the guy who was the head of the ballet school in, I think it was St. Petersburg, he sent Tchaikovsky instructions on like how many bars for each particular section of the piece. And that was the same kind of dynamic that occurred with King Kong, where he's writing music based on what he's seeing on the screen. And then there was also Captain Blood, which was one of the best soundtracks.
I was going to mention Eric Korngold, who did Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, and that is just
I don't know if he did the Seahawk. I think that was. I'm not sure who did Casablanca. I think that was Max Steiner.
Yeah,
the same guy who did King Kong.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember which one it was. One of them got on the last train out of Germany before they started like imposing restrictions on who could leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like he got on the last train, literally just decided like I'm getting out of here. Gets on the train.
Done with this shit.
Yeah, the next train he could not have left. Yeah, that was on the documentary too. I think that was probably Korngold. Sounds like.
Well, and Korngold did do Seahawk, and he did do like the Private Lives of Elizabeth and Essex. So I mean, he did a lot of what were Errol Flynn movies, and then like King's Row and some other stuff. So yeah, Korngold's another one that. Well, I think it's even his music that they kind of ape in Animal House when Bluto is dressed as a pirate during the parade, and he's doing the thing like this, and John Belushi, and he swings down and stuff, and they're playing that dun dun da da dun da da dun dun da da dun.
Yeah,
dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I love that that's Korngold score.
I have not watched Animal House in 20 years.
You really should. I still get a chuckle out of it. The irreverency of it all, and the fact that it's just so not modern, so not made for a modern audience.
Yeah, I think what kind of I want to say shocked me, but I think that it's obviously a film for many reasons that could never be made today, and yeah, I remember watching it. I just gotten into high school, so this was kind of like my impression of what to expect when I got into college. And it wasn't things that I don't know if that was what it was like back in the day, but things had calmed down a little bit. It wasn't nearly as crazy, but man, I remember there were some scenes that like, yo, dude, there's no way they could get away with that now.
Well, Chris Miller is one of the guys that wrote what ended up being the screenplay for that, and wrote some of the stuff that ended up being a basis for the movie as far as the original inspiration, because he wrote that stuff for National Lampoon. And Chris Miller's still alive, and he actually within the last decade or so wrote about his actual experiences at college. I can't remember if he went to like Dartmouth in like the early 1960s in like 62 or what East Coast liberal learning, higher thinking in that period of the early 60s. But so you can tell where some of the stuff that was in served as a source of inspiration. So it sounds like, well, like anything, the boomers took advantage of every little bit of money, decadence, opportunity presented in post-war America, and they ate that crap up and left very little behind. So it's but it is what it is. I mean, because when you think about it, I mean, what boomer parents are the ones that are responsible for Gen X, and boomer parents were so busy enjoying their own lives that Gen X kind of raised itself. And
I think I've done podcasts on this, and I honestly, at some point, probably when I'm in my 40s, I'm going to write an actual book on this. But so there were two.
Will it be your first nonfiction book wise? I mean, I know you write nonfiction articles and periodicals and things like that.
it'll be my first nonfiction book that I publish. And it's going to be looking into, and my argument is that, boomers, if you look at their age group, it's 1946 to 1964. That's a huge gap, or not gap, but that's a huge time frame.
Huge range, yeah.
And so my argument was that the first, I call it first wave boomers, 1946 to like 19 something, they raised Generation X. The latter half raised the millennials. The first wave were very hands-off, latchkey kids. Like, do you know where your kids are? It's 10 p.m. The other half were, I don't want to say they were helicopter parents, but their parenting style was very different. And that's led to very different things with them, where Gen Xers were used to just being able to do whatever they wanted in their, Matthew Broderick is a boomer, but like he portrayed Gen Xers in his movies.
Right.
And it's very much like his parents are just not involved in anything he's doing. Whereas millennials, it was different. They were very much involved in stuff. And so I think that's one of the problems that Gen Xers, when they're like, oh, the millennials don't know this, or it's like, yeah, dude, like you were pretty much allowed to do whatever you wanted. And it wasn't like even you had to ask for permission. You just went and did it. Whereas I don't, my experience from other millennials, but I think with a lot of millennials, there was this permissiveness, but it was controlling. Like where the parents controlled, but it was a permissive control. Whereas Gen Xers were just, the boomers are off doing their own thing. Gen Xers were allowed to do whatever they wanted. And,
every man for himself.
And I think that absolutely affects how they parent their kids. I mean, I look at how a lot of millennials parent their kids, and it's kind of like, it's really weird where the kids seem to be in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get that, but I will say I am very glad I would not have wanted to have been born any later than I was. I would have accepted being born earlier because, oh God, some of the stuff I would have done in the 70s had I been just a little bit older. And I mean, I did some stuff in the 70s. The first cigarette I smoked was in the 70s. The first beer I drank was in the 70s. The first girl whose breast got to be my playthings were in the 70s. And I'm not even talking about my mom. I mean literally, at a girl's house, parents are gone, listening to music, looking at her dad's Playboys, talking to her about stuff, and she, takes me back into her bedroom and starts taking off her clothes. So, I mean, that was all in the 1970s. So
I think but that raises an interesting point where I'm seeing a lot of boomerism among some Gen Xers and even millennials, Zoomers, and all that. Would you prefer to be born? Would you like to be in their generation? No, nobody wants to be born in that era. I don't think anybody does. And so, for millennials, we grew up in a very interesting time, especially for me, because
Clary?
I think that we kind of got to see the sunset of the old America, but at least for me, we got tons of. This is why I know all these oldies, because all these older people were sharing me stuff they grew up with as a kid, and we had all this like context and this background. And whereas now I talk to some of these young kids, and they have no concept of anything that occurred before they were born.
Yeah, my son number 3, and I got this story. I got one version of the story from him, and I got another version of the story from his mom. But anyway, he was expressing his appreciation for the fact that musically, so this ties into our subject tonight, he was exposed to so much music above and beyond what most of his peers who were born in the 2000s were exposed to. So, I mean, he has this deep appreciation of music, like his brothers, because all of his brothers are musical. That's one of the things they got from me to a varying degree. So he was just very thankful of that and appreciative of that, because he's in his early 20s now. So, and I've got one that's still in single digits, but the one in single digits about a month or so ago, his mom, he has one of those little Kindle things from Amazon that he can play Minecraft on. And he can also listen to music. I guess his mom got a Spotify account and then set up something for him because he really likes music as well. He's been exposed to tons of music because of me. And so I had a proud dad moment, because he was walking into the kitchen with his Kindle and asking his mom, who was over, if she could add Swedish Pagans by Sabaton to his Kindle. They're a more modern European heavy metal band who I've seen in concert and were really good. But their music is thematically military themed songs. So, I mean, one of their songs is about Gallipoli. One of their songs is about the siege of Vienna and the winged hussars arriving, with Sobieski leading them to save Vienna and Christendom in Europe. And they've got a song about the Bismarck. So, I mean, so really interesting band, a lot of interesting music. Their best album to me, I think, is The Art of War. So I would recommend that, The Art of War by Sabaton, if you're a metalhead and a military nerd. But anyway, yeah, he was wanting Swedish Pagans added to his Spotify, because he had heard me listening to Sabaton, and but he had also had the band Europe added to his Spotify because of me, and a lot of other different songs. So yeah, he definitely gets an introduction to rock music from the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s from his dad, and then of course metal music, which for the most part has only been coming out of Europe since the 90s, because, you know, God knows the music industry over here had to do everything they could to kill it to make room for grunge, and all the other crap that came out of the 90s. I think the only 90s band
bullshit.
The only 90s band I like, or will say I like, or have songs that I like, that I think is better than the grunge bands that they're lumped in with, is Alice in Chains. I do like some Alice in Chains songs, but as far as, you know, the best thing about Nirvana was the Weird Al Yankovic parody. Although there is an Elvis impersonator from either Scotland or Ireland. He was either an Irish mailman or a Scottish mailman, and does a really, really good Elvis impersonation, at least musically, as far as singing goes. And he released 2 albums now, at least. The first one was called Gravelands, and it was a bunch of cover songs done by artists who were sadly deceased. So, for example, Blockbuster by The Sweet, because at the time Brian Connolly was dead. Also, A Whole Lot of Rosie by AC/DC, because Bon Scott was deceased. And since Kurt Cobain was deceased, he did I think it Smells Like Teen Spirit, but it's the one. So it's Elvis crooning, "Come as you are, as a friend, as I want you to be," and it's just, I just absolutely love it, because it's like, yeah, it absolutely works. It absolutely works better, but it also completely fits, later era Elvis. Because had Elvis not died when he did in 77, I could have seen him going into the 80s doing, various cover songs and stuff, and it would not have surprised me.
Yeah.
to have had Elvis, you know, a 70-year-old Elvis in Vegas, you know, singing whatever the popular rock song was. So, you know, he might have sang I Ran by Flock of Seagulls or something. Who knows? And it would have been awesome because it would have been Elvis.
I think anything that he did would have been just great and funny as fuck.
Oh yeah, I just I like Elvis a lot. I like there's several other like 60, 70 crooner kind of guys like Tom Jones. It is watching a Tom Jones video from, you know, any time in the late 60s to early 70s, watching him perform and move and gyrate and jump. I mean, just total macho energy. And you look at the audience and it's all women, and you look at those women and you can tell, and it doesn't matter if some of them are there with like husbands or boyfriends. Every single woman in that audience, whether she's 60 years old or 16 years old, you can tell by the look on their face, you're sitting there in wet panties, aren't you?
Yep.
Because I mean, it's just
even the postmenopausal ones.
Yeah, even the postmenopausal ones were all wet and ready to go, because they love that male energy. Because imagine that, Tom Jones, unapologetically masculine, and women respond positively to that. Who the hell would have thought? I'm sure that's never been your experience, Vince. Right?
Oh no.
You know?
That's complete alien to me.
It's just funny. But I mean, look at the kind of music, you know, and that's one of the things, like with metal, when I understand there are certain like hardcore metal nerds that it's like once the chicks started liking heavy metal and the heavy metal artists started playing for the chicks instead of playing for the music became more poppy and it lost its edge. And as a music nerd, I completely get that and I completely understand that. But I also know this: if I'm in LA in a band playing music, do I want that bar to be filled with a bunch of guys who really love my music and really love my lyrics and really love the way I play and the passion I bring and just the depth of my lyrics? And it's like, I absolutely understand their perspective and their, you know, basically being in Rush, right? Or do I want to be in Poison, telling them to talk dirty to me and then banging 20 of them after the show? Well, if I'm a 20-year-old kid playing rock music in LA in the 1980s, yeah, I would rather have 300 girls at my show than 300 dudes. It can't be helped.
Correct.
You know, and
that's one of the things. And speaking of can't be helped, it can be helped, but we're not going to. We are going to keep this at the hour mark, which we're over by 3 minutes. So if there's any last minute questions regarding music, throw them up in the chat. We'll answer a few real fast before we sign off, because we're all old and we need our beauty rest.
Currently playing an Alice Cooper.
Oh.
Nita Strauss. Autographed.
So Blake's Monster Bushes. Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I shave those shits. Fuck that. Tie that bitch down to my coffee table and shave the fuck out of that.
Hey, it's 1977, 78 in a girl's room and she's undoing her pants. Yeah, I'm just happy to be there.
You know? Well, obviously,
You
I'm
know?
looking back on it with
Yeah.
a more mature, lens.
Oh, well, yeah,
Obviously,
well,
yeah, but yeah.
now it's like, okay, I can set guidelines now.
Correct.
But
I
when
am
I'm
not in a little bit of a landing strip, something that's intricately mowed, if you will, and carved.
Mhm.
That's fine. But some kind
especially
of
when she does
monster
the Christmas
bush,
tree at Christmas
exactly.
time.
Yeah, or like a naked kind of
Not
thing,
hang
whatever.
on forest.
Right, exactly. But if it looks like an out of control, a monster bush poking out of like granny panties.
They saved the rainforest.
Yeah.
That's the noise that your fucking dick makes when you come in contact with that.
It's fungal.
I am sure. I swear to God, if there's not been a movie or book that has had a Vietnam veteran use this line, but it's like, woman, that's the worst bush I've ever seen, and I served 2 tours in Nam.
Right.
If that line has not been used by someone in fiction,
It needs to.
It needs to be.
It needs to be used. Yes.
If nothing else, Vince.
I know, right? I will.
Yeah,
I'll have to use that.
Yeah, you will. Some future edition of Laserdiscs, you'll have to have some veteran who like served in like Borneo or something in the Second World War. It's like, that's the worst bush I've seen, and I served 2 tours in the Pacific.
Exactly.
But by all means. So anyway, gents, it's been a fun show. And what have we got coming up, Vince?
All right, so this Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern, we have Hans Komain back on the show. He is a world traveler, a bicyclist, an avid bicyclist. I think he plays guitar. He's a musician, and he is a seducer of women. In fact, he wrote The Way of a Seducer, which is a very short book, but very good. It's like a poet. Not even that. It's almost set up like a stoic Marcus Aurelius if he was seducing women.
Okay.
It's very poetic and very to the point, and it reads like poems.
Okay.
So yes, that's Saturday, and then May 8th we have Rollo's game,
Dungeons and Dragons.
Correct, but even before that, I forgot this. Almost forgot this. I know you would have reminded me.
Yeah.
Friday, we have a live stream painting game with Rollo, yourself, myself, and in the chat, ARM Details, AJ. So he's going to be joining us. He just bought a crap ton of Warhammer. Is that 30K or 40K, AJ?
40K, I do believe. Oh yeah, he jumped into that rabbit hole. And blamed us for it.
He did blame us, yes. Which, I mean, we were good. We'll take the credit for the inspiration.
Yeah.
So
yeah, so a lot of MG stuff coming up in the next over the next few days. So
exactly. So, but I'm going to remind everyone in the new. I did remind before, I think, and I did let everyone know in the newsletter know. So MG is taking a much needed rest, a hiatus, if you will, a summer vacation. For the months of June, July, and August, we will only be broadcasting once per month. On the off Wednesdays, we'll have a video essay from either TJ or Rob Says or myself back on the Masculine Geek Life website. There are essays that have been posted up there for years. I'm actually creating video essays for them so you can listen to them. And we'll be returning to our regularly scheduled broadcasting schedule in September. But for the rest of the month of May, you'll get the Wednesdays. Blake, you're gonna have to go back and listen to find out. So this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern is the painting, and we will have rogue broadcasts and Friday painting sessions in the summer. We just won't have the regularly scheduled Wednesday every week. So, and they will be announced when they happen. So
yeah,
just keep your eyes peeled. You'll definitely know in the newsletter if I actually send some out, more than I have been. You'll know via that, or perhaps the community tab on the Masculine Geek YouTube channel.
Yeah, and if
you're lucky enough to be a part of the Instagram group, then you'll know there too.
Yeah, and if you follow me on Twitter, if for some reason I get bored some Wednesday night and decide I want to hop on for a little bit and play with toys or do something on a Wednesday night for an hour, I'll post something about it there. And I may like invite someone on, like, TJ or Rob or someone like that, see if they want to hang out and talk with me for an hour, just to shoot the crap while I play with toys or mess with something. So don't hold your breath for it, but I may start having withdrawals and have to hop on for you guys.
Well, like I said, it won't be. It's not going to be forever. It's only going to be a few months.
Yeah.
So it'll go by quick, and we will still have once a month. So, and then the random, usually painting will happen on Friday nights.
Yeah,
if and when they do. So over the next week, you're going to get 3 Masculine Geek events. The painting on Friday, Hans Komain is a guest. He's going to be talking about international dating and women in general and his experiences. So that's going to be kind of cool. That's going to be on Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And then next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern is Rollo's game campaign, which, as far as Drew's game is concerned, we have an announcement there. Thor from the Dragon Ship will be joining. He's been wanting to play for a long time, and we're adding him to Drew's game starting sometime in May, I think, end of May, or it may wind up being one of the days that we play in the one broadcast
show
we
on
play
Wednesday night.
in June. Yeah, so we'll see, but he'll be joining us. All right, I think we've exhausted all that. Everyone knows if you need more remembrance, go back and watch the tail end of this show. All right, everyone in the chat, thank you for joining us. As always, a distinct pleasure. To your health. And anyone who's listening and has gotten back this far, or lasted this, yes, raise it up high, has gotten lasted this far, thank you as always for doing so. Until then, TJ, please, as usual, take us out.
All right, guys, keep the fires burning. Keep the lead shooting down range. I'm trying to figure out what I completely blanked on what the last one was. Fires burning.
Don't take any wood nickels.
Don't take any nickels. Don't drink all the rum. Tune into us when we broadcast next, which is
that'll be Friday and then Saturday and Wednesday. There you go.
All right.
I'm gonna play our commercial and then I'm gonna play our outro music.
Welcome to Masculine Geek, where men gather to discuss life, love, and all things geek. And unlike most YouTube channels, we don't beg for super chats. We don't play cutesy little sound bites. That crap is lame and feminine. We're men swapping notes and gathering together for men talk. We don't whine about politics or trendy red meat topics. That's juvenile 13th grade garbage. Masculine Geeks are men of courage and honor that gather together to discuss our hobbies and interests. Get on board, gentlemen.